What's good, Super Riders? Today we're going to learn how to hop our mountain bikes. And the best thing that's going to come from this is that you're going to become a lot more confident riding technical sections. Being able to hop your bike is going to give you a chance to reset and readjust your bike and your body while you're riding through tricky sections. And being able to have that one element in place is what's going to make you more confident. This is actually the first thing that I learned on my mountain bike as I was making my way to becoming a trials rider, and just being able to use the hop to balance in place, to move around. All of that unlocks so much for every style of riding, and I'm going to tell you everything I know about it. I'm going to break this down into 3 parts to help you learn it even faster. We're going to first talk about lifting the front wheel, then we'll talk about lifting the back wheel, then we're going to talk about a technique called rocking. After we've got those 3 totally mastered, learning to hop is going to be super easy. Before we get into the technique at all, one thing I want to talk about is the suspension fork on your bike. Now, if you have the option to lock out your suspension, I recommend that you do it before you start learning this technique. However, once you get it locked in, then open it back up so your suspension is active again, and then continue practicing the skill. Because ultimately, when you're riding your bike normally, your suspension is going to be open and active, and it doesn't do you any good to learn a skill with everything locked out and then not be able to use it when you're riding traditionally. The goal here is to be able to add this into your riding. So start with it locked out because it'll be easier. You won't be fighting the bike, and you'll be able to learn it faster. But then as soon as you have the fundamentals in place, open it back up and get after it. The most important element when it comes to lifting your front wheel or back wheel or rocking is actually this idea of unweighting the bike. So it's easier to lift a wheel off the ground if your body weight isn't over it, which feels obvious, but it's a lot harder to do in practice because you feel like you're centered on the bike, but you may be over that wheel. Getting confident over those balance points of the front and back wheel and knowing where your body position is and how you're weighting the bike appropriately is going to unlock so much of this whole process. So we want to think a lot about where our body position actually is, where our center of gravity and our weight is over the bike. So for example, when you're lifting up the front wheel, you want to make sure that you're actively putting your weight over the back wheel, and that makes it like a lever to make that front wheel come up. I did a whole video about this, how to lift your front wheel on a mountain bike, in a previous thing, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time working on that. But what I want you to think about is this process of weighting the bike and unweighting the bike and knowing how much of a difference that actually makes. It's not so much this big physical effort to like yank this wheel off the ground. It's more about putting your weight on one side of the bike or the other to make the opposite side lift. There are videos for both the front wheel and back wheel lift on this channel, but I want to give you a couple details here as we're building up to it. And the first thing I want to say is that you can practice this to start rolling along. So just having a little bit of speed as you practice this is going to help you. And the better you get at it, you can start slowing down until eventually you get to a stop. So what I would practice first is rolling along and lifting the front wheel up and making sure that I'm confident getting it off the ground. The one thing that's going to help is leaning back over the back tire and doing a rowing motion to pull that front wheel up. That's going to get you really confident when it comes time to lift that front wheel off the ground. The back wheel lift is something that we talk a lot about, and we use this scooping motion where you want to think about using your back pedal, and almost exclusively your back pedal. Think about, again, going back to weighting your bike, putting all your body weight over the handlebars, and then you use your back foot to push down, back, and up on that back pedal. That's going to help lift the back wheel off the ground. And again, you can do this rolling as well. So do those 2 things where you're rolling along, lifting the front wheel, and then lifting the back wheel. And then when you add to it, you can even be rolling along, lift your front wheel, put your front wheel down, lift your back wheel, and you're doing kind of a rocking motion while you're moving along. Now that you're starting to get more and more confident with this idea of lifting your front wheel off the ground, lifting your back wheel off the ground, what I want you to think about now is not moving. So stopping instead of rolling and still doing the same thing. And I would start with the front wheel. So think about this idea of lifting up the front wheel and putting it down either to the left or to the right to work on your balance. So if you're falling to the left, you pick your front wheel up and put it to the left. If you're falling to the right, you pick it up and put it to the right. Think about using your tires to keep your bike on balance. And this is all going to play out once we get into the hopping. But this idea of being able to move one wheel at a time and lift it up the ground and put it back down is going to help a lot when it comes to this idea of hopping where we're lifting both at the same time. So when you start working on this technique, you're rolling and lifting the front wheel. Now we're getting to a point where we're just at a stop and we're lifting the front wheel up, lifting the back wheel up. This is going to take a little bit of time and coordination to get to, but you can do it by slowing down a little bit at a time until you realize that you're at a complete stop. And that's where we get to this phase of rocking, where you've lifted up your front wheel and put it down, then you've lifted up your back wheel and put it down, and you can start to kind of rock all over the place. This is really the precursor to being able to hop in place. I'm breaking this technique down in a way that I think is going to be beneficial to you in the long term and give you a lot more bike control, but there is a fast way to learn this movement. And basically what it is doing a bunny hop on flat ground. So when you're rolling and you do a hop, you're going to do a hop more similar to the style that people do when they're clipped into their bike, where they just yank the bike up into their bodies as they're riding and the bike pops up. Now that you've learned that scooping motion with your back wheel to try to get that back wheel off the ground, you can actually do exactly that, where you're rolling along on flat ground and you pull the bike up into your body and you get a little bit of distance off the ground. It's not the most effective way to bunny hop, and it's definitely harder to do with flat pedals than clipless, but it can be effective. So you can do this process where you're just doing the clipped in bunny hop, and that's going to give you the hop that you need, but you're missing out on a lot of really great technical skills when you do that. So even if you're clipped in, work on that front wheel lift and the back wheel lift. Regardless of what pedals you're using, let's get into the hop now. So what I recommend at first is to do this at a slow rolling motion where you're picking both tires off the ground. And how I would traditionally do it, I would sink into the frame with my body. I'd put my elbows and knees out and make myself kind of like a suspension, kind of a spring. I'm going to drop into the bike, and then I'm going to pop straight up and use that scooping motion with my back pedal and pull the handlebars off the ground. That's going to kind of spring me down and bounce that bike off the ground. And I don't need to get very high. In fact, the higher I jump off the ground, the more off balance I can end up being. So I want to just have a quick hop off the ground. This is super easy to do with clipless pedals. Flat pedals, you really got to focus on making sure that you're doing that scooping motion with the back pedal. But just do this one time while you're rolling to get both tires off the ground confidently. As you progress, as you get better at lifting the bike off the ground, try rolling to a stop and then doing that exact same motion. Give it that one hop. Now that you've got that first one locked in, we're going to work on getting that second hop. And how I want you to think about getting that second hop and the third hop and the fourth hop after that is that where you're hopping the bike is actually to reposition it underneath you. And so if you're off balance in one way or another, you're picking the bike up and just resetting. So you can start by hopping in place, but you may very quickly start hopping to the left and to the right to put it underneath you. And this is where you start the whole process of learning to hop in place. Hey, just a quick thing I want to mention. We were actually shooting the photo here while I was on the Twitch stream this morning, and one thing that the guys were asking was how high you actually should jump when you do this hop. And the thing I want to tell you is that this thing about hopping isn't about getting high off the ground. It's to readjust your bike and to stay within balance. And so it's not about getting a 6-inch hop every single time, because more often than not, jumping higher will throw you off balance. So just think about hopping enough off the ground that you can readjust. And if that means it's just like a little bit off the ground, totally fine. Once you start getting confident with this hopping motion, there's a handful of drills that I'm going to give you to help advance it and really lock it in. The first drill is going to be hopping side to side. So what you're going to do, you're going to hop 5 times to the right and 5 times to the left. And then go the left side 5 times and then back to the center again. Start hopping the bike in these sideways movements. You're going to learn all about hopping to keep the bike underneath you. So when you're hopping to the left, you're trying to stay on balance. And the more confident you get, the farther you can actually start doing these hops. And you can start to feel out not only just the hop, but could you hop a little bit of distance? Can you hop 2 inches over? Can you hop 6 inches over? How far can you pick up and move the bike? And one little tip here, the higher you pull the bike up, the more time you have to set the bike back down, so you can actually hop farther the higher up you pull it. The next drill I'm going to give you is to start hopping forward. This one's actually really great when it comes to riding technical terrain if you're really struggling in an area. And one of the things that I teach on this channel is actually the wheelbase hop, where you can jump an entire bike length forward eventually. But just start by trying to hop the bike a few inches forward at a time and see how many times you could hop forward. This is like a trials 101 right here, being able to hop the bike just a little bit forward and a little bit forward. It'll really help you out, believe me. The next drill I have for you is hopping with a twist. So think about a clock and start hopping in a counterclockwise or clockwise motion. One tip here, you can actually use your back foot to guide that back wheel around. So if you're right foot forward, you're gonna hop in a counterclockwise direction. If you're left foot forward, you're gonna hop in a clockwise direction. See if you can do the full 360. And the last drill I'm gonna give you is try to find an uphill section and put yourself parallel to it and try to hop up the hill and then back down the hill. This one's extra useful, especially when it comes to building confidence for technical sections. Knowing that you can actually get height and hop up something is gonna help you out a ton. So this is a great first step in getting even better at riding your mountain bike. And if you wanna continue to advance on your mountain bike, I made a playlist for you that's right here with all the techniques that are gonna help you out. If this hopping thing is totally for you and you're getting into it and you want to learn a little bit more trial stuff, here's a playlist right here of all the things you need to do to get started.